Okay, first of all, welcome to all who have joined us. Glad you could make it tonight. We have a very interesting speaker, guest, who's going to share his experiences. He's a bit of a local guy for me, so we have a lot in common. Uh, he's so we're going to banter back and forth on some of that, I'm sure. Um, okay, now, first of all, this is not our regularly scheduled. Obviously, that was the fourth Sunday. I'm going to be getting back onto that routine come January. So we will be holding these on the fourth Sunday of every month. And the guests will be rotated. We'll have people, we'll have panel discussions, we'll have topical, we're going to be very topical as well. Now, tonight I'm going to introduce Dan Harari. I've got a significant amount of information to share about him. Um, and we're going to talk about his main points and some of his experiences and the books that he's written. He has, with John, he's an author, published author, and I'm sure you all will want to hear more about his books and maybe order them and read them, and we'll talk about them sometime as we go forward. Um, Now, with that being said, let me tell you a little about Dan. First of all, he was born and raised near Asbury Park. And of course, if you're a Bruce Springsteen fan, Bruce Springsteen put Asbury Park on the map along with his East Street Band. Dan has also published, as I mentioned before, 4 books, and I'll go into a little about those as we go along. And I'm sure Dan will fill in any of the blanks that I leave. Um, he's been a Hollywood publicist for about 50 years, and he's been very close with obviously many celebrities, being that he's in Hollywood. And now I can share with everybody. Netflix has been before my planning board, and they're getting ready to build a major complex, including 12 sound stages and a back lot. So we're going to be seeing a lot of interesting things about a mile from my house. So,
I
um,
wonder, I wonder what my father would have thought of that, Joe, you know?
he's probably, pardon the expression, turning over in his grave right now.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a
yeah.
shame Fort Monmouth went away, but anyway, that's another story. Dan has had several books. I'm going to ask him to talk about those books at some point. And he also began hosting a podcast called Live from Hollywood. It's Paranormal Tonight. Okay, and his Five was the last book that he wrote. It was on his 68th birthday. And Dan has also had 4 UFO experiences, one with his father that was very interesting. So if you've read the MUFON Journal, you will have seen the story in the MUFON Journal about Dan's sighting with his dad. Um, so without further ado, what I'd like to do is start to go right into asking some questions and having a conversation. Now, later on, we're going to take a break from this, or we're going to flow into the topic of drones. And of course, drones now is very, very much in the lexicon. It's also much in our minds because everybody's very worried about what's taking place right now. Nobody knows, contrary to what people are saying at this point. We don't know who the protagonist and the antagonists are, but we have some pretty good ideas, I'm sure. So anyway, um, before I start, does anybody have any questions about what I've just covered?
I worked with Bruce Springsteen in 1973 before he was famous, by the way.
I actually played in a band that played. We were the upstairs band at a place called Rendezvous, and he and his motifs were the downstairs band.
Wow. Did you ever go to the upstage? There
I
was a
know, I know the upstage. We actually, well, that's we're digressing, but
okay.
know a little about it.
That
Not a
was
lot.
before that was before my time. I worked at the Sunshine Inn in Asbury Park for years. I was the stage manager there.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. All right. Well, let's. No other questions or comments from anybody? Briefly? No. Okay, let's go right into where we're going. Okay, Dan, tell me about being a publicist. You've been a publicist for over 40 years, so what can you say about it? Briefly.
Okay. Phil, thanks for having me on. I grew up on the Jersey Shore, like Joe said. I went to Boston University. I studied communications. I got a Bachelor of Science degree in communications. When I was there, Howard Stern, the famous radio shock jock, he was there too. He was 2 years ahead of me, so I used to see him in the hallway. And then I met him in Hollywood 10 years later. So Howard Stern and I both went to BU at the same time. After college, I had a job briefly in New York City at Columbia Pictures movie studio. I was an assistant publicist there. It was the summer of '80. A friend from college got me the job. I worked with Brooke Shields that summer. The hit movie came out called The Blue Lagoon. So I was 23 years old, and I was at a movie studio in Manhattan and working with Brooke Shields, and things were pretty cool, except I had no money at all. I was commuting from the Jersey Shore into Manhattan. So if anyone's ever ever done that for more than 4 months, you're a better man than me. Because after 4 months, I was on a bus 4 hours every day, 5 days a week. I couldn't do it. I had some friends in LA who invited me to go visit them in 1980. I said to my dad, should I go visit? My father said, Schmuck, don't visit, move there. He goes, move there. That's where the show business is. Move there. I said, okay. So my entire life hinged on 5 seconds with my dad when he told me, Schmuck, move to California. I said, okay. I didn't know where California was on a map. I literally didn't know where it was. Long story short is for a couple first year and a half I was here, I had some temp jobs. I was answering phones. I was a gopher. I was a typist. I had odd jobs. I finally landed at the American Film Institute, which you may have heard of. It's called AFI. That was my first real job. I was an assistant to the principal of that film college. It's one of the world's top film colleges. From there, I got a job, of all places, I became a publicist at the Playboy channel, the Playboy cable channel, which was not good for me personally because I had just gotten married. And I'm working at the Playboy channel with Hugh Hefner. I'm surrounded by naked women all day long. And then I had to come home at night to my wife. So that she wasn't too happy. She wasn't too happy about that. From there, I got a job at Columbia Pictures Television on the Columbia lot in Burbank. I had one of those little golf carts you get to drive around. And at lunch, you wave to Clint Eastwood and you're waving to Barbara Streisand and you're waving to Richard Dreyfuss and you're waving to Jim Henson. I became friends with Mickey Dolenz, the drummer from the Monkees. When I worked at Columbia, he was my childhood hero. I played drums my entire life because of Mickey Dolenz. So now, 20 years later, after the Monkees, I'm having lunch with Mickey Dolenz at Columbia Pictures. So that was pretty cool. From there, I got a job at a very big PR firm. I represented Jay Leno when he first got The Tonight Show. I was Jay Leno's publicist for the first 2 years he had The Tonight Show. And I also worked with Sid Caesar. Probably most of you know Sid Caesar. I worked with Milton Berle um, and some other projects. Then I went to a very big firm for 8 years. And during that time, I was doing red carpet events and award shows and movies and TV shows and meeting Kevin Costner and Meryl Streep and just every celebrity almost Tom Hanks, everyone you could think of. So I've been surrounded in that world for quite a while. When I turned 40, I had an epiphany to start my own company, which I did. So I am now 68. My company is called the Asbury PR Agency. It named it after Asbury Park, obviously. My company is 28 years old. I do PR for films, TV shows, restaurants, uh, charities, authors, filmmakers of all kinds, documentarians. And yeah, it's been a long time. My first book, which came out 2 years ago, I'll hold it up here, is called Flirting with Fame. This is my Hollywood book, Flirting with Fame. A Hollywood publicist recalls 50 years of celebrity close encounters. Now, I go 50 years because when I was in high school, I worked at the Sunshine Inn in Asbury Park, which is a long gone rock concert hall. Today, everyone thinks, everyone knows the Stone Pony now. I worked in Asbury before the Stone Pony existed. The place was the Sunshine Inn. Bruce Springsteen played there quite often. I worked with him. I worked with Kiss. I worked with Fleetwood Mac. I worked with Humble Pie, Jay Giles Band, Deep Purple, Mott the Hoople, Edgar Winter, almost every major 70s rock band. Now, at the time, I had long hair, and I'm a drummer, and I'm riding my bike after school to the Sunshine Inn to work with, Mott the Hoople. I got paid $0. I worked there for 3 years. I never made a dollar there, but I got to meet all these famous rock stars when I was a teenager. So I've had a very, very interesting life when it comes to celebrity and fame and live performers and things like that. It just kind of lined up for me, but again, I'm not retired. I like what I do, so I'm still an active Hollywood publicist as of today still.
Okay, Dan, I just have to jump in for a second. There's something that most people aren't aware of. Hollywood, California, where the name came from. Dan, do you know the story?
Um, I know how Hollywood began as the film capital. There was a tract of land called Hollywood Land that they were selling parcels of. That's what the original Hollywood sign said, Hollywood Land.
Yeah.
But I really don't know where the term came from.
It actually came from Long Branch. The Hollywood Hotel on Hollywood Avenue in Long Branch is where all the actors and actresses stayed at the turn of the century. And when the movie industry filtered out to California, the area that became Hollywood, they named it after the Hollywood Hotel.
That's great. I did not. I knew the film industry started in New Jersey.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it started in New Jersey, and also the Lumiere brothers, I believe, in France, also started it, like 1888 or whatever year that was.
Okay, I'm gonna, Dan, if you bear with me on this. Uh, Bruce Pearson, you have any quick question or comment?
Well, I think Dan and I can talk about some mutual friends and some people in the music industry and so forth, but that's not pertinent. One of the things I want to bring up that I think I can bring later on in the discussion. I'm actually one of four owners of a drone company that's been in existence for about 12 years. Some very highly technical people. We were building, well, we did the first network broadcast out of a drone in HD. We exhibited out at NAB a
Wow.
number of years ago. We built custom drones. So I have some insight in that, and hands-on experience with that. The thing that Dan can speak to this better than most. My experience in public relations and that type of stuff is varied, but in the military, I was in public affairs with the Coast Guard, as you know, Joe. The concept and the theories that have been floating around about the interjecting and cooperating and co-opting the media, especially the film industry in the 50s and 60s, to promote an agenda that is held by the government or DoD or the military, is a fascinating and I think a very possible scenario in order to and there is a protocol in military public affairs called the paradigm shift, which is at the upper reaches of budget and people and so forth. Have you run into anything, Dan, in your background, and you weren't necessarily dealing with anything of this topic directly, but have you had any input from the military or the government or any interest or anything that you could shed light on the possibility that there is some connection there? Because that's a viable, at least theory, I think, whether it's real or not.
I personally no, but I have two anecdotes I could give you from Steven Spielberg, who I met and worked with once. Um, Steven Spielberg, when he was creating the film Close Encounters, which we all know and love, it's my favorite film I've ever seen ever in my life. He worked closely with Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was the science officer for Project Blue Book. They became very good friends. Alan Hynek was on the set of the film, advising Steven, and Alan Hynek's in the scene at the end of the film. He's smoking
Right.
a pipe. He's smoking a pipe. There's a close up. He's actually in the film itself. So now I'm good friends with Paul Hynek, who is Dr. J.
Right.
Allen Hynek's son. Paul
Right.
Hynek is a good friend of mine. He's on the board of directors of my group called the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. Paul said to me that Stephen and his father worked very, very closely together. Stephen incorporated some of the stories in Close Encounters from real life sightings that Alan Hynek had told Stephen about. Now, people say that, Alan Hynek was sort of a prop for the Air Force, which he was at first. For many, many years, he famously said in 1965 in Michigan, a
Yeah.
major sighting was swamp gas. And people, no one believed him, including Gerald Ford, by the way, Representative Gerald Ford at the time. He was the shill for the Air Force. Along the way, Alan Hynek said, I don't want to BS anymore. I want to tell the world what's happening. So by the time he was working with Spielberg, he was giving him some good intel on that film. The other anecdote related is when Steven Spielberg showed his movie E.T. at the Reagan White House. Reagan
Right.
was the president. They showed the film to a VIP group of people. At the end of the film, Reagan stands up and says to the crowd, there's probably 6 people in this room right now who know that what we just saw on the screen is real. And Spielberg looked at Reagan, and Reagan wasn't laughing or smiling or winking at Spielberg. He was dead serious, talking about an extraterrestrial being. So the common thinking in Hollywood has long been that Spielberg is plugged into the military or, the truth, what's really going on. He's such a high profile, successful director. So that's the only anecdotes that I can think of. I've not had any personal experience with that.
Man, thank you. Okay, let's go on to the next topic here. Um, your dad worked for the U.S. Army at Fort Monmouth.
Yes.
Okay, I think I might be able to share some information, but why don't you share what you have first, and then I'll bounce it back.
Okay. Yeah. Because I've been looking forward to talking to you. My dad was born and raised in Brooklyn. Both my parents were from Brooklyn. They met on Coney Island Beach, 1950. My mother was 15. My dad was 19. My dad, my dad's older brother worked at Fort Monmouth first, for only for a few years. So he got my dad a job at Fort Monmouth, Camp Evans, in the radar branch in the summer of 1951 is when my dad started at Fort Monmouth. And he was there until he retired in the fall of 1996. So my dad was there for 45 years. All right. Now, me and my 2 younger brothers, we never had any clue what our father did for a living. My father never spoke about his work. He just didn't. He didn't talk about it. I wrote down right before we went on, Joe, I wrote down the few things my father ever told me ever in his entire life about what he did for a living. Number one, and this is all for me, between the ages of like 6 and 12, is what my dad told me. These few things. When I said, Daddy, what do you do for a living? My father said, I helped America win the Cold War. That was his go-to answer. Okay. I helped America win the Cold War. My dad once told me he sent beacons. This is in the early 60s. They sent beacons to the moon that would ping some kind of a signal. Okay. I'm 6. I'm like, okay, cool, Dad. Can we get ice cream? I have no idea what the man is talking about, right? He did tell me the one thing, the most he ever told me was I helped to invent drones, which I didn't know what that was. And then this is the most he ever told me. He said one of his oh, you know what? I'm going to do share screen. Can I do that?
Sure. Hold on.
I
You
actually
should be able to just hit
I,
share and bring it up.
I practiced this. No, no, I'm doing it from my end.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I have to.
You have to allow me to do share screen.
I just want to make sure that it is. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. All right. Can you see that photo?
There it
Yes.
is.
Okay,
Yep.
all right, so that's my dad. Have you ever seen a more stereotypical engineer than my than my father? Look at that guy, right?
He
With
doesn't
the,
have a pocket protector.
Yeah, he left his pocket protector home. Must have been Sunday.
yeah, it was probably was. So that's me on the right, and my middle brother Bob was probably 1 or 2. So this photo is like 1962 probably. And that's my dad. He always had a pen or a pencil in his pocket there. Um, I found this. All right, so here's what I want to say, and then I'll show you something. My father once told me that he invented a drone, he said, that looked like a flying garbage can. And I think, if I recall correctly, this is the late 60s. I think he told me it was spying on North Vietnam. He said this drone took photos with film, right, analog film, and when the canisters of film were done, they dropped the rolls of film with little parachutes, I think he said, to the ground, and they had homing beacons, these rolls of film, so that our troops on the ground could find them. Now, I found something, if I can do this. What am I doing here? Oh, I suck at this so bad. Here, share. Okay. I found a clip of like 2 seconds. Watch this. Now I'm going to freeze frame it. See this thing?
Yep.
Yeah,
Tell me that doesn't look like a flying garbage can,
Yep.
right?
absolutely.
That looks like a flying. When I saw this, a friend of mine, Earl Anderson, the head of MUFON Los Angeles, said, Dan, I think this is what your father built. Look, that's a flying garbage can. That's my father's drone. I think it is. Okay, stop share. All right, so that was that. And then the other thing I remember that he ever told me was he wrote a report that JFK read. My father was I was in the car taking me probably to buy shoes, and he goes, I wrote a report that President Kennedy read. Okay, those are the only things he ever told me, ever. Now, I would like to read some of this. Showed this to Joe before. My dad died in 2017. After he died, I found some old papers of his. One of them was this profile of my dad, and I could pull this up, but I want to read some of this to you. I'm going to share. Okay. I believe this is from Fort Monmouth. It's called Joe, you can tell me what this means. CSTAL newsletter. CSTAL newsletter, May 1985. I don't know what
Yeah.
CSTAL means.
I don't think that's Fort Monmouth per se. That might be a trade organization that he was part of.
Okay.
IEEE. Okay, I see down he's a member of IEEE. So, CSTA Laboratory.
Yeah, I don't
Oh
know what
no,
that.
CSTA. No, I believe that would have been over at Camp Evans. Camp Evans was not a place that was widely understood or known.
Okay.
We
Yeah,
you
he was
got
at
meetings over there, but the work that was actually done there was highly classified. So
right.
yeah.
He was at Camp Evans.
Mhm.
All right, so it says during my father's senior year of college in 51, he came to work as a temporary engineering aide, GS4, at the radar branch of Evans Signal Laboratory, where he learned which end of a soldering iron gets hot. Okay, that's pretty funny, right? He returned to college, got his degree, BS in physics in 52. He came back to work as a physicist, GS5 at Evans, where he's been ever since. Okay, now, with his long career with the CSTA laboratory and its predecessor organizations, his career has been replete with solid engineering accomplishments. Early in his career, he worked on a variety of airborne electronic systems for air navigation,
Based
position,
on yep.
position location, missile guidance, and drone control. In the 60s, he planned and executed the Surveillance Drone Database Program, a major R&D thrust to expand the technology base of unmanned aerial surveillance and target acquisition. He devised and developed radar set, and whatever those letters are,
Yeah,
AN/UPQ4,
those are radar systems.
which later became the radar tracker for the early versions of SOTAS. Joe, what is SOTAS?
I don't know exactly what the acronym stands for, but yeah, it's one of the specialized radar units that they had.
Okay, and
Um,
all
they
right,
had Firefinder. They had a number of different type of radars. Some were tactical, some were, more strategic, like the antenna in the background on my screen. That is one of the radars that the radar lab was using that actually started. It coordinated all of the space tracking that was done from the 1950s going forward.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a TLM-18. It was built in 1958. That also is where the first image of a hurricane, a live image of a hurricane, was downloaded. It was flown by helicopter to Washington, D.C., and put on President Eisenhower's desk. It was
Wow.
1960, I believe. That was.
That's, yeah. All right.
Yeah, so there are a lot of, yeah, that was the radar lab for the, started out with the Army Signal Corps. And then, of course, when CCOM, or all the different acronyms that came later, Communications and Electronics Command, most recently, that everything came out of there. It was also part of the Manhattan Project. So as far as top secret and highly classified work that was done, it was done there. Much of it we'll never know what came out of there. And that kind of goes to what you were alluding to before, Dan.
Right,
The
right. I want to
fuse,
just read a little bit more there. In the early 70s, my father and this other guy formulated and engineered the alarm helicopter radar system, which begat SOTAS, which begat Joint Stars.
yeah, J stars. Yeah.
My dad also planned and directed the remotely piloted aerial observer designator system program, which culminated in the first successful laser designation of a tank target
Mhm.
from a mini RPV, resulting in a direct hit by a Copperhead laser-guided artillery round at White Sands Missile Range in October 75.
Yep.
In, let's see, 76, he became project director of the radar surveillance system. He managed the successful program from its inception till he assumed his present position. He got these other things, MET data system placed into production, and all this stuff. I have no idea what this means. This is cool. Over the years, my father received awards, commendations, and certificates too numerous to include in this newsletter. You guys, I had no idea my father ever won an award in his life ever. He never mentioned anything ever once. And the last thing is, he's a senior member of the IEEE and a charter member of the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems. Now, doesn't that mean drones?
Yep. Exactly.
So my father was a charter member of the Association for Drones. So I think that's pretty cool, right?
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So that's who my father was.
Okay. Like I said, Fort Monmouth, generally speaking, and Camp Evans, and the work that Dan's father did was highly classified. Now, it goes far beyond that. The historical significance of the site is beyond belief. The fuse mechanisms for the bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were actually designed right there at Camp Evans.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And that
I'll
was
have to
also what was stolen and given to the Soviets.
I'll have to tell my
Became a
mother.
very famous spy trial. So
Was that the Rosenbergs?
yeah, he actually worked there from 1940 to 1945. 1946, he came back as a contractor, and he was actually turned in by his wife's cousin's husband, who was busted at Los Alamos National Labs. He was a spy, and in order to negotiate a deal for himself, he turned in Julius Rosenberg. But then to make sure that he didn't get the electric chair, he turned in Ethel Rosenberg as well. Unfortunately for Ethel, Ethel was not a spy. Julius was, though. So,
So Julius worked at Camp Evans?
yep, for the Army, directly for the Army.
That's incredible. Wow.
Camp
That's a great,
Evans.
I didn't know that at all.
Well, anyway, so that's the lowdown on Fort Monmouth. And your dad sounds like the real deal. Drone technology. I have 1997. I spent 6 weeks out in the Mojave Desert, and we were testing 57 initiatives that came out of Fort Monmouth. One of those was drone technology. So I can validate what your father was doing.
I wonder if you and my dad ever crossed paths.
There were 8,000 people that worked at Fort Monmouth, civilians. Engineers were a class of their own. I was on the logistics side, so we didn't have a lot of time to spend fraternizing, except if
Okay.
we all played softball.
Wow. Joe, how many different campuses? I know there was a Fort Monmouth in Eatontown.
Well, you actually
How many
main post was Oceanport, Eatontown, and Tinton Falls, but then you had Camp Evans that was in the Wall Township section of Belmar.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
also had Camp Cole. Camp Cole was over in River Plaza.
Right. So there were, it sounds like five campuses all told.
Yeah, but they had probably other satellite locations too, where they may have tested or whatever.
All right, here's something interesting. I just thought of to tell you. Uh, my dad bought our nice house in 1963 in West Deal on Dwight Drive in West Deal. That's where myself and my brothers, that's where we all grew up. Across the street, Joe, was the Deal test site.
Mhm.
I
That
grew up I
was
grew up
part of the
across
radar labs.
I grew up across the street literally from the Deal test site, right? Now, I always wondered why we lived there. And after my father died and I researched the Deal test site, they were the first site in North America to detect Sputnik.
Mhm.
And there's a photo of Werner von Braun at the Deal test site.
Yep.
So now that makes sense. Like my dad must have, I know he went to Camp Evans, Belmar, because I actually dropped him off there a few times as a teenager. But my dad must have done some stuff at the Deal test site too, I would think.
Oh yeah. Matter of fact, he was probably working with Western Electric Bell Labs. There's a building that looks like a lighthouse, a wooden lighthouse. That was the major command center for the Deal test site.
Wow.
Yeah, it's right by the library. Behind the library, you'll see a building that looks like a lighthouse.
Wow, that's great. So yeah, that's where I grew up. Now, I would like to jump to my remarkable UFO story with my dad, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, then I'd like to open it up for some questions too. So,
Okay. Okay, so that's who my dad was, and you know who I am. Now, in March 1970, I was 13, almost 14, but I was 13. And one day my dad picked me up from school to drive me home, suburban New Jersey. I'm going to say it was probably 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so it's daylight. My dad is driving me home in New Jersey, daylight, March 1970. I'm in the car. We're talking about whatever. I look through the windshield. Through the windshield above my father's car was a huge silver V, letter V, like Victor, silver V, shiny, huge, hovering above my father's car. So it's just hovering silently above it, the car. So I see it through the windshield and I go, Dad, there's a UFO. Stop the car. Dad, stop the car. There's a UFO. My dad stops the car. We get out. We stand in front of the car. I'm literally, you guys, I'm jumping. I'm 13. Dad, isn't this cool? Look, it's Star Trek. Dad, look. It's Star Trek. Dad, UFO. Great. Isn't this great? Isn't this great? I'm so happy, right? My father, you guys looked at it like bored to tears, looking at his watch, looking at his shoes, looking at his car. I should get the car washed probably. Looking at this thing, couldn't care less. No expression on my father's face. Like he was bored. Like he was bored. That never made sense to me, right? So we're looking at this thing. It's huge. Each wing is like two school buses, shiny silver, no smoke, no propellers, no sound of any kind. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My father couldn't care less. So he goes, "Come on, kid, let's go home." We get in the car. We're driving home. The V followed the car again for another block or so, and then silently went off into the distance. Okay. I come home. This is 1970, rotary phone. I pick up the phone. I call the Asbury Park Press newspaper. I go, "Hello, my name is Danny. I'm 13. I just saw a UFO with my father. I want to report a UFO." And the lady said, "Sonny, I can't talk to you right now. We're getting hundreds of phone calls about this. I'm very sorry. I gotta go." The lady hung up on me. I remember clear as day. I looked in the paper, you guys, every day that week, and no article ever ran. Nothing ever ran. Now, there's some amazing things happened afterwards. Number one, I forgot that that event happened for 47 years. I forgot that that happened for 47 years. Then my dad passed away. My dad died April 2017 in Florida with his second wife. I get the phone call. I'm very sad for days. About 3 days after my dad died, and this is a true story, you guys. I went to a deli near UCLA to get a pastrami sandwich because my dad and I used to go there to get pastrami sandwiches. I went to this deli. I ordered a sandwich. The waiter walks away. I'm sitting there thinking about how much I miss my father. 3 days after he died, a beam of energy or light or something from the sky came through the air, hit me in the head hard, like knuckles on my head, like bang, hard. And then through my eyes and brain was projected in front of my face, about 6, 8 inches in front of me in the air, was a 3D color hologram home movie from 1970 with audio of the sighting I had with my father 47 years earlier. It played. I swear on my daughter's life, this is a true story. It played. I'm watching this. I'm like, holy S, I can't believe this. I remember that as I'm watching it. I remember that. And it was just like I described. My dad's car, the V, I'm in the movie. It's not a memory. I'm in a movie. I'm jumping up and down, and my dad's bored. Then my dad looked at me, winked at me, and said, "Come on, kid, let's go home." Okay. Then this little movie dissipates, just dissipates. Now my heart is beating fast, my hands are shaking. I'm clairaudient. Every now and then I'll get a message in my right ear. I've had it my whole life. Get a pen, get a pen. You need a pen, you need a pen, get a pen. I asked the waiter for a pen, put it in my hand. My hand did automatic writing. On the table placemat before me at the deli was it was paper placement. With the pen, my hand wrote the following: write a book about benevolent aliens. Lead character's father knew about UFOs. And then I wrote capital A, capital T, capital C. And then my hand stopped moving. The pen went down, my hand stopped moving. Now my heart is racing. I pick up this paper, I'm shaking. I'm like, what is happening? What is happening here? First, I have this vision. Then I get automatic writing. So, write a book about benevolent aliens. I go, well, I guess I have to write a book, right? Lead character's father knew about UFOs. Now, my dad just died. And I'm telling you, as God is my witness, I think my dad from heaven sent me that message, that home movie. Lead character's father knew about UFOs. Where would I have pulled that from? Had to be from my father. Then ATC, all capital, right? I didn't know what it was. I looked and looked. And after a few minutes, I came up with my book title, After They Came. ATC. This book was given to me at the deli by my father from heaven. He literally gave me this book. So after that experience, I researched my dad, and that's when I found out about his drones and his work there. But I found some other things out. I asked my mother, I said, did Dad ever talk about UFOs? My mother said, my mother said sometime between the early 50s and the early 60s, somewhere in there, they took my dad deep into the vaults at Fort Monmouth, deep into the vaults, showed him something highly top secret. My dad came home. He was pale and shaking and nervous. And my mother said, honey, what's wrong? My father said to my mother, I saw something today I can never tell you about as long as I live. He walked away, and my mother said my father was never the same again. Now, if that's not an ET craft or a chunk of technology or an alien, I don't know what would have upset my father to that degree. But something remarkable happened. In Richard Dolan's book, UFOs and the National Security State, he has a glossary of U.S. military-based UFO sightings. There was one in 51, there was one in 52, seen on radar. Those are the years my father started working there. He had to have at least heard about those UFOs. He had to have. If he didn't see them with his own eyes, he had to have known about them. My mother said my father went to White Sands Missile Testing Range all the time. Okay. I know my dad went to the Pentagon quite often because he would be gone for a couple days at a time. Where are you going, Dad? The Pentagon. So that we knew. And then the killer is, do you guys know who's Dr. Stephen Greer? You probably know who Stephen Greer is.
Yep.
Last year, Stephen Greer did a 3-hour press conference at the Washington Press Club, and he showed a slide of 145 U.S. military bases that he has proof of through his whistleblower network that worked on reverse engineering of UFO technology. 145 bases. I freeze framed it on my big TV. I freeze framed it. I went with my finger. Number 51, and I could show it to you. I didn't pull it up, but I have it. Number 51, Fort Monmouth, New Jersey.
Mhm.
So I believe with all my heart that my dad knew about, if he didn't work on reverse engineering of extraterrestrial craft, and it explains the UFO sighting I had with my father because he was bored to tears, like he had seen this thing a million times. And then when he winked at me, right? The wink was, here's the wink, because after I got this movie after he died. So the message from my dad after he died was, Danny, I couldn't tell you. Remember that UFO that we saw together from 1970? I couldn't tell you what that was because it would be breaking an NDA with the government. But I know what that was. I was involved with that project. My dad told me that from heaven 3 days after he died, 47 years after the fact. So and then once I wrote this book, it opened a whole new world for me within the world of ufology, and we can talk about that as well.
Along the same lines, the UFO sightings in 1951 was in Project Sign, and they actually had them on radar, but they were also visual by some Air Corps pilots that were chasing a UFO down the Jersey Shore,
Wow.
Manasquan. Now, that was in Project Sign in 1951, but the validation actually came number of years later from an interesting place. Ed Asner was a radar operator at Fort Monmouth.
I didn't
Went
know
to
that.
radar school, and he actually witnessed the radar sighting. Now, over the years, they said, well, it was an anomaly, it wasn't a UFO, blah 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 blah. But he validated it very strongly. He said we had them tracked. So
I'm friends with Ed Asner's daughter. That's that.
ask her about her father's UFO sighting at Fort Monmouth.
Wow. Okay. That's very cool.
Okay, what I'd like to do, John Ventry, you have any comments or concerns about what Dan has just shared?
Not really. We going to talk about drones, or did we already talk about drones?
Yeah, we are going to talk about drones, but
Okay,
we'll
no,
get through this. Yeah, okay.
I'm good with
Um,
listening to the stories.
okay. All right. Let me go on to here another question that we should have. Um, okay, you mentioned about the Disclosure Alliance. We can go into more of that towards the end there.
Okay.
Why don't you tell us about your podcast, Dan?
Okay, sure. Okay, well, I'll do in a linear fashion. So I wrote the book after they came, 2017, 2018. I got it published in 2023. It took 5 years till I got a publisher. After that book came out, I went to a bunch of UFO, like Alien Con, UFO Con, several MUFON events. I did some MUFON online chats as well. I did George Norrie, I did Jimmy Church, I did a ton of interviews. And as a result, I became friends with Stephen Bassett and Richard Dolan and Nick Pope and Paul Hynek and Ron James. These are all actual friends of mine now. So that was very, very cool. Um, Also, because of that, I then became friends with a guy named Ron Janix, who is the new owner of Contact in the Desert. And this past summer, and again next summer, I'm the publicist for Contact in the Desert. I helped. We got an article in the LA Times, the first time in the history of LA Times, they wrote an article about UFOs, real life UFOs in the entertainment section because of me. Independent of like a Spielberg movie or a J.J. Abrams movie or something. They wrote about the phenomenon of UFOs in the LA Times. So I met more people through Contact in the Desert. One of those people is a lovely woman named Margie Kay, Kay. She's the head of MUFON, or she was the head of MUFON St. Louis, and she offered me a podcast. In fact, January 9th will be exactly 1 year that I've been doing the podcast. So it's a year old. Live from Hollywood. It's Paranormal Tonight, which I think is, I love that title that I came up with because I am 50% Hollywood and now I'm 50% a ufologist. So it's both of my uh, passions really in life. I've had about 50 guests on in the past year. I've had famous people. I just had Michelle Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas talking to me about her UFO experience. Thomas Jane is a famous movie star. Dee Wallace is the star of E.T., the movie. She's a dear friend of mine. So on one hand, I've had a lot of notable Hollywood people that I interview. It's a live 1 hour podcast every Thursday night. The other
That's
half,
on X. Excuse me for interrupting.
yes,
Right? You're on the on X, yeah, because Margie owns
UNX
that
network.
and
Margie
Ray
K.
Taub runs that, so he's a very
Grace
good
Hobbs
friend
is
of
my
mine.
producer, right?
Very good friend of
The UNX network. The other half of people I've had Richard and Tracy Dolan, Nick Pope, Ron James, Ron Janix, Paul Hynek, just a ton of Earl Anderson, the head of MUFON Southern California. So each week we talk about aliens and UFOs. Sometimes it's ghosts. It's paranormal with a Hollywood bent to it. And it's been great fun for me. It's really been a blast for me.
Okay.
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
Contact in the Desert, was that run for years by Alejandro Rojas's wife or girlfriend, whoever she was? Did she sell it recently?
It was run by a woman named Victoria. Was she Victoria?
Okay.
Victoria sold it 2 years ago to Ron Janix and Gordon Peckrell. Gordon Peckrell is a wealthy man out of Texas. He's a construction business tycoon, and he bought it from Victoria 2 years ago. So Gordon Peckrell and Ron Janix own it and run it now. I don't know if Victoria was related to Alejandro. I think you're thinking of a different.
Yeah,
I think
that's
you're.
from,
Are you thinking of UFO Congress, maybe?
oh, yeah, the one that's in south of Vegas.
I think that's what you're
Yeah,
thinking of.
Yeah, okay, that's
Laughlin.
what I'm
That's in
thinking of.
Laughlin, Nevada.
Yeah, Laughlin. Yeah,
Right.
okay. Yeah, I've never spoken at Contact in the Desert, so
You know what?
keep my name.
Send me your bio. I'll pitch it. We had our Christmas party last night for Hollywood Disclosure Lines. We had 60 people. I had Bob Salas there, Ron
Yeah.
Janix, Ron James, Earl Anderson. We had a lot of very cool people there, and Ron Janix is looking for speakers right now. So if you want to send me your bio, I'll be glad to send it to him.
Here, I'll send it to Joe right now. He can forward it to you. I don't have your email.
I will
Well, maybe I
let you
do have
know.
your email on that email.
It probably is there. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good.
Okay. What about the podcast live from Hollywood? It's Paranormal Tonight.
Yeah, we just did that. That's what I just talked about.
That's
Oh,
what you
okay.
just talking
Okay.
about.
Sorry. Um, okay. Now, also, you mentioned two members of your organization that are actively working towards disclosure.
Yes. Okay. So Steve Bassett and I co-created the Hollywood Disclosure Lines together. We came up with it together. We put it together. He put his contacts, I put mine, and I call us the two fathers of Hollywood Disclosure, and I also call us chocolate and peanut butter. We're two flavors that happen to work well together. Steve Bassett is very good friends with, and you guys all know, I'm sure, Daniel Sheehan, Danny
Yeah,
Sheehan in Washington.
the attorney.
Danny Sheehan is a very, very famous civil rights attorney in Washington. He has a group called the New Paradigm Institute, in which he and Steve Bassett and others are meeting with Chuck Schumer and Marco Rubio and Nancy Mace and Tim Burchett,
For sure. Yeah.
Tim Burchett, and people in Congress, Senate and the House for years, the Grush hearing that happened last year, and the hearing in November 13th, a month ago, that happened. Danny Sheehan had a hand in corralling Lou Elizondo and David Grush and Tim Gallaudet and these other people to testify before Congress. So Danny and Stephen are both on the board of directors of my organization. So they're the Washington Brain Trust. You know, I'm the Hollywood I'm the Hollywood guy. They're the geniuses in Washington.
Okay, the along the same lines, though, let me take a quick poll here. How many people believe that what we're getting from these congressional hearings is the real deal, or what do you think it is? In 2 minutes, 2 minutes out of clip. Why don't we start with somebody who we haven't heard from, Bill Belfer? Why don't you give us your thought?
Microphone.
You're muted. Okay. Okay, Bill.
Bill,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
There we go. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
now we do.
I've listened to both of those congressional hearings, and I think that the whistleblowers are legit. I mean, the admiral recently, and Navy admiral,
Tim Gallaudet. I've
yeah,
spoken with them.
and of course, Grush and Captain Fravor or
Right.
Colonel Fravor, whatever.
Ryan
I
Graves.
mean, yeah, Ryan Graves. I mean, they're all legit people, and what they're saying, I believe. I believed it before the testimony. When I was a kid, I believed in UFOs. So this is really nothing new to me. It's just that it's taking so long to get out. I mean, I approach a lot of people. I said, "Do you see those things, those congressional hearings, and listen to the testimony?" No. I said, there's UFOs. Really? No. Nah. It
That's
really hasn't filtered down yet. It might have been disclosure, but it really wasn't enough. It's got to have a real zets from the president, I think. And maybe he's afraid to say something, but
exactly.
they were great, those testimonies.
Okay.
They're, these
Okay.
guys are these guys. I'm sorry, Joe. Let me just say something. These guys are swearing to God before the entire world, in front of Congress, that extraterrestrial life exists, that we've had retrieved craft and technology for 80 years. They're swearing to God that this is happening. And then, like when Grush spoke, I watched it live. I was like, oh, fine, this is it. This is disclosure. The next day, the LA Times, page 19, Air Force guy says aliens exist. It was like 3 paragraphs. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is to what Bill just said. How is this not the biggest story on the planet Earth? How is this not the headline of every extraterrestrials exist, says this major guy. What happened was the military and the government said, oh, David Grush used to have depression and he's been on medication and he punched his wife once, and they go throw him under the bus. The guy's the biggest hero at the last 100 years. They throw the guy into. You don't hear about David Grush anymore. I don't even know if he's. I hope he's still alive. But I agree with everything Bill just said. I agree. I think these people are absolutely real.
Thank you. Okay, Mindy Gerber, we haven't heard from you. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's time for disclosure. It's been long overdue, and these guys are legit and they should be heard. And the suppression net is doing everything it can to keep it low key. And I think it's time.
Thank you, Mindy. Bambi Dudley, what about you? Oh, mute.
No, I just caught a Facebook entry which amused me, and I guess I have a different look. Even though UFOs are real, there was a cartoon on Facebook that I happened to pick up from Mainline MUFON, and the 4 guys are there, and each one is a different caption, but it's like one of them says, "NASA needs more money." Lou says, "Sorry, I can't talk about that." And Gallaudet says, well, it's confidential. So I am not on the high side for these hearings.
Good points, Bambi. Okay, Bruce Pearson, how about you?
Well, I'd like to just maybe add a little perspective to this. I stand on both sides of the bridge, both the creative, production side, as well as, this 53rd year doing, investigative and broadcast journalism to some extent. I think what you're seeing here is we have to understand when you step back and look at the big picture, a number of agendas, a number of areas of expertise or lack thereof, a number of intents. I think what you are seeing, though, and it's inevitable, and I've done some articles on how the bus is being driven by the technology. It is getting harder and harder for any government or any agency to keep a lid on millions of high-def cell phone captures. People that are now not losing their, as was always the leverage for people in the military or the government, not losing their medical benefits in retirement, their retirement pensions, and so on.
Right.
So it's becoming harder and harder for the lid to be kept on. They are never going to, in my opinion, ever going to voluntarily release anything to a large extent because it destroys their credibility on so many levels. It is clear from the last 20 years in polls by, biased organizations and non-biased organizations, whether it's the Pew Trust or CNN or Reuters or anybody else, that the vast majority of the public, right or wrong, and when they're polled about this, think, yeah, we know you've been lying to us for 70 years. So you go back to Stephen Greer's original disclosure press conference at the National Press Club in 2001. We see more and more viable, reasonable, documentable, vetted evidence, and more folks, and Joe and I talk about this all the time, of people that from military backgrounds, all different types of backgrounds, industrial backgrounds, pilots. I've spent, 20 years all over the world in the cockpit of commercial aircraft doing aviation documentaries and spoken to so many people behind the scenes that say, yeah, we've all seen this crap, but we don't want to lose our job. So my point is this. I think that we're moving to it by the sheer weight of the technology and the inability, to put your finger in that many holes in the dike when there's 500,000 people with cameras taken. Look at how many sightings MUFON documents or Peter Davenport documents in the National UFO Reporting Center every month. So I think it's inevitable, and I think it's a slow creep, but I don't think you're ever going to get acquiescence by the government to come forth because they'll have egg all over their face for lying to us and hiding it. And to some extent, perhaps at one point it was viable to do that, but I don't think it's you can't keep the technology undercover forever.
Thanks, Bruce. Very good. Excellent. Stanley Nazemic, how about you?
How are you all doing?
Hey, how are
I
you?
have a lot of friends and came from a discussion this morning regarding it. I think a lot of people are concerned about it, but once again, don't have the information to be more concerned about it. They see them up there, they count them over the weekend, they talk about it, but that's about as far as it goes because there's no information being sent out other than they're there.
Yeah.
That's it.
In a
Excellent.
week from now, we'll have moved on to something else, unfortunately. We
Probably.
have about a 7-day window, and it'll disappear like it never happened.
Correct.
Very good, Stan. Thank you. Gloria Morrow, you're the last.
Don't skip me.
I'm saving you for the last, John.
Thank you.
Gloria, can you hear me?
She's in there somewhere.
I see the
see her
camera.
ceiling.
See your ceiling fan.
They made a movie called Gloria and a song.
Gloria, can you hear me?
Doesn't look like
Okay, well, we'll try Gloria a little later on. Okay, John Ventry.
All right.
Dude.
Well, did you guys, if you have your November MUFON journal, did you read my rebuttal I wrote in there? It was a letter to the editor and a rebuttal to Reverend Barry Downing's praise for Ancient Aliens, the Ancient Alien TV series, Lou Elizondo. I thought I very eloquently, for once, said what I needed to say. And I really challenged them, where is the proof? And you say all these things. What I see is a bunch of amateurs here getting involved in the UFO field that we have been investigating, for a very long time. And I see them making the same mistakes, mimicking, whatever, Blue Book 2.0, the Robertson panel, trying to trick us. And they make all these claims, and yet they offer us nothing. Although, they say that there are biologics and there's an entity and there's this and that. And when you press them, oh, well, I have a security clearance and I can't go any further. That's very convenient. But if you really, and I think we've talked about this in the past, when you really look at how they rolled this out, with Bigelow and MUFON in 2009, then we find out it's, Harry Reid funded it. And then you bring in Blink 182, and that whole thing, Academy of the Stars, was the biggest phony thing I ever saw in my life. Selling shares and then bankrupting it because you sold, it's almost like Bugsy. He sold 10 times more shares than he could.
The flamingo, I think it was.
Yeah, the
right?
flamingo. Yeah. So they take in 2.3 million, but they spent 32 million. So I guess it was 15 times more. I mean, if you really look at the way this whole thing is rolled out from the government, and I can really go into detail, but it's like, why are we supposed to believe that the debunker is now the facilitator? I just, there's an agenda here. And, and if you look at the media in this country, especially over the last 4 years, you can't believe one thing that they say. It is completely spun. And I don't want to get into politics, but if you see how they went after Trump and how they did everything possible to make Kamala look intelligent and not coked up, and it didn't work because we saw through it and the public didn't go for it. But there is an agenda here, and I don't know what it is. It could be part of this whole drone thing you're seeing. And whatever it is that the government comes out and says, it's an absolute false flag. It is not true. It is something they're trying to trick us with. And I hope the whole UFO thing is real. Otherwise, I wasted about 25 years of my life looking at this, more than that. But where is the proof? And it's not there. And I don't trust any of these people.
May I add something to that, John? Because I think
ahead.
it reinforces it. And I work with a bunch of guys in the production and documentary field. I am very concerned, and I think that we all can agree that the introduction of AI in this field with a lot of well-intentioned and interested and passionate people that don't have the expertise, this will circumvent any ability to, unless you know the provenance of footage or video, and I mean, a chain of custody would be appropriate. There will be no way on God's green earth to discern whether anything is real or not real. Right up into the film industry, Joe and I have this discussion all the time, but I know people that are utilizing AI now to provide all kinds of video content. So, people who ask me is on all these paranormal shows over the years and stuff, they say, is this stuff real? Well, I can't tell you unless I sat there and watched the digital footage come out of the camera, go to the editor, and I sat and looked over the guy cutting Premiere to make sure it wasn't, manipulated. I can't tell you from looking at it. 10 years ago, you couldn't tell whether it was faked or not. But now it is totally impossible, either whether it's audio, licensing the images of actors and then just have an AI GPT build a movie and it's ready to go in 3 days with nobody who was involved in it. Joe can argue against this because Netflix is putting millions of dollars into sound studios. It's not going to totally disappear. But how anybody can discern what's real and not real anymore, I think you might as well quit looking at it. Unless you don't know the guy that took the footage or woman that took the footage and you were there or something to that effect, you will not be able to determine. It goes beyond whether there's an agenda or whether you have a bias or whether you have, some reason to do it. There's no way to tell. It's not like the old days of you could see any aliasing if they were, dropping stuff in over the top of it. If you put it's far beyond that. And I have a degree in broadcast engineering, so I'm not blowing smoke. It's a real concern, and on any level of news that we're going to consume, I think it's going to be a crapshoot. So I think it's scary.
Think about the ramifications of lying to Congress, of perpetrating a complete fraud, and I'm saying if they don't have the evidence, if they, if the Tic Tac video is really our drone technology, and you're doing this. I mean, like, I think doing it in front of Congress is worse than doing it in front of the Pope.
But there is no consequence, John. I mean, I watched more hearings than anybody ever know. I watched the whole Iran-Contra hearing end to end. When Geithner was lying, it was saying he wasn't going to tell Congress what happened to all the bailout money. They didn't hold him in contempt. Nobody takes the pipe for this stuff. They threaten and they blow smoke. These people just walk away with impunity. There's no accountability. So your point is well taken, but nobody ever seems to go out with wire ties and their hands behind their back.
Yeah.
And so we're lied to so frequently, and most people don't have any critical thinking skills or discernment. So how many people listen to this stuff and really pay attention to what's going on? How many of us have the time to do that? I think
But you know what was funny? One last comment. What was funny? I was a 100% true believer in UFOs, and you guys know that, until they came out and the government said it's real. Then I said, wait a second. Now I'm more of a skeptic in watching what they say and applying my training as a security director in behavioral analysis and body language, watching Grush, who I think was lying through his teeth, just watching his mannerisms from my training. So now I'm more critical of what's being told. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, I have one perspective on this, and it goes back to 1970. 3 sightings while in the Coast Guard, and my conversation on a tennis court with a gentleman that was a Navy enlisted man that worked at Fleet Intelligence Central Pacific at Pearl Harbor. When I told him about the 3 sightings that we had on board my ship, he started laughing. I figured, this is it. He's laughing at me because I'm a UFO nut. Then he said, no, that's not the reason he was laughing. He said the reason he was laughing was because he said we get thousands of those reports every year just from U.S. military craft. Okay, that was 1970. That was a year after Project Blue Book shut down. That was after the Condon report. And now here we are 50 some years later, and we're listening to a handful of things that were sightings, but nothing else. So my thought is, when they start releasing thousands of these reports, then we will have disclosure. Until that point, if we get 20 or 30 of these reports and that's it, now we're getting some type of misinformation or disinformation. Okay, it's a control of the narrative more so than being the narrative itself. Nothing more I can say on it.
Roswell is a perfect example of that. Okay, yeah, it's a weather balloon. No, it isn't. It's real. It's not. Then 2 days later, then it's Schiff tries to get it. The GAO we found out they illegally disposed of all the records, and then it's the case closed, and just goes on and on and on. We don't have to have any more proof than that. That they'll just keep stringing it along until you die off. I mean, that's like the classic case of them lying through their teeth for their own. There is a paradigm shift protocol in the U.S. military and public affairs, and the stated goal of this, and we were told in public affairs school, you'll never use this; it's never used. To bring the alignment of the public sentiment, the paradigm, into alignment with DoD missions and goals, and it's an unlimited time frame, and it's unlimited personnel, and it's unlimited budget. Well, I think that's been underway. Clearly been underway and in effect, if you will, perhaps knowingly or unknowingly, or at a big level, a large level, with the UFO question. They just keep going on and on and on. I have another story that we don't have time. It's not on track here, about a mistake that was made after World War II in the Nevada desert with an above ground test. They wiped out a whole Crossroads village. And Dr. Walt Balicki, who we met at the Jerome Hotel, he owned it at that time, opened the vault and showed my father, my brother, and I pictures of how they just moved the town and re-landscaped it and had unlimited budget to tell relatives and neighbors and anybody who would ask for in perpetuity that it didn't happen. And I saw the photos. I mean, photos and photos of it. And this guy worked on a Manhattan Project. So yeah, let me tell you, they'll lie through their teeth about anything, and I think we all know that.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Okay, Bambi, yes. You're muted, Bambi.
Can we return to the drones?
Yes, as a matter of fact, that's what I was going to.
I've been reading all the
Okay.
accounts. I want to know, where do we go to find out about the 40 or so drones that are over, it was Monmouth, and it was also Absecon, and it was also over Trump's golf club. So I'd like to know, where do we go to find out what the deal
Right
is?
now, no place.
Right.
Okay. Nobody seems to know anything. Bambi,
I don't believe that. I
Okay.
do not believe
Well,
that.
nobody's letting out anything. Let's put it that
Okay.
way.
Okay, hold
And-
on, everybody. Hold on, everybody. Okay, we're going to go into that in about 5 minutes. I want to give Dan a last chance to talk about his books, and then we're going to go and we'll finish up on the drones. Okay, you're not being forgotten, Bambi. Promise. Okay, Dan.
Okay, that's very sweet. All of this, everything you've all said is very, very interesting. A couple of things. My dad could not wait for his pension. Now, this is something Bruce alluded to. I think my dad retired, not 65, I think maybe he was 67 or 68. My dad, once he hit 50, I can't wait to get my pension. My pension, my pension. My dad loved that pension. He wasn't going to tell my mother or me or anyone he knew about aliens. It was not going to happen. He was going to get that pension, okay? I believe Grush and Lou and these others, and I believe they can only go so far. They can only say so much without getting killed, getting thrown in jail, losing their pensions and their money, being never heard from again. So, if they say, well, it's confidential, you could see if you're watching closely, to me, this is my opinion, these guys have more to say. They're not allowed to say more. In Lou's book, which I do not have, but it was a New York Times bestseller, Lou's book, there are pages, I've heard about this, pages that are blacked out in his book. He had to get his book approved, and there are pages that are blacked out. There's a lot that these guys would love to say, and they're being restrained. It's like, it's like a horse at the start of a horse race. It wants to run, but you're pulling it back. To me, that's my opinion. These guys would love to say more, and they don't know if they're going to leave the Capitol building and get assassinated out on the street when they go back to their cars. So that's my thing. Also, the feeling seems to be from my group of people that Trump will be the disclosure president. Why? He's a different kind of politician, obviously. He has been alluding to two things that he wants to open up, the UFO files and the JFK files. He said to Joe Rogan in October, if you saw the Joe Rogan 3-hour interview, he has alluded to UFOs and JFK to, if he has the ability to provide more, he will. We think he's going to be I think Trump's going to be the disclosure president. If these drones are extraterrestrial, if they are, and they're lining up with Trump by a couple of weeks, and he's going to be the president, perhaps there's some kind of message to him. Hey, Donald, we're here, and, we're rooting for you. Tell the world, because, we're right here. We're literally right here. So I personally have a feeling Trump's going to be the disclosure president sometime next year. I think it's coming. I agree. The president of the United States or the Pope or Putin or Xi in China, some major king of England, major person goes on TV. Ladies and gentlemen, I have something to tell you. Extraterrestrials are real. They've been here for a very long time. We've known about them since the 1930s. We didn't want to scare you, but now's the time. national security, but we felt now was the time because, they'll be landing, they'll be at Walmart buying groceries. I mean, we're going to see aliens walking around. So someone's going to have to announce it in advance. I think it's going to be Donald Trump. Um, my books, Flirting with Fame, is my Hollywood book. A lot of funny things in there. Pictures of me with Spielberg, Jerry Seinfeld, Mel Brooks, Alice Cooper, Hugh Hefner. A lot of great photos are in that one. My After They Came book. This is a sci-fi novel about two benevolent aliens who come to Earth. They save mankind, working through this schmucky guy who is drowning himself on his 70th birthday because he's miserable and he hates his life. They save his life. They make him the hero of Earth. And at the end of the book, he wins the Nobel Prize. He's a millionaire. He's reunited with his children, and he marries the girl of his dreams. So I call this Close Encounters Meets It's a Wonderful Life. And it's based on some of the events me and my dad had together in there. My newest book came out this summer. This is called My Paranormal Life. This is real stories of my entire life, ghosts, poltergeists, angelic voices, spirit guides, incredible dreams, remarkable coincidences, my 4 UFO sightings. This is real life stuff, My Paranormal Life. This one just came out. And Dan Harari, author.com or Amazon. Dan Harari, author.com or Amazon. Also, all of you, I'm inviting any of you, Hollywood Disclosure Alliance.org, O-R-G. You can read about us. You can see our mission statement. Basically, what I created there is half of our members are UFO, UAP, ET experiencers, researchers, or disclosure advocates. The other half are writers, producers, directors, performers. We have several, Shirley MacLaine. We have movie stars in there. And I'm like I said, peanut butter and chocolate. I'm smushing them together because they're sharing. Like last night, we had our Christmas party, and people were talking about documentaries and books and films and TV shows. People were pitching each other over our fajitas that we had at the Mexican restaurant last night. So it's a wonderful place. I'm very proud of it. HollywoodDisclosureLines.org. And I'm inviting any of you who might want to be interested. Go there. There's a button that says join, and you could just follow the steps and you could become a member.
Thank you, Dan. I'll send out an email to everybody with the pertinent information on it. And
thank you, Joe. That's great. Thanks. And Joe, you should join too, man.
I'm definitely thinking about it. Okay, let's go into the drones. Now, first of all, let me give a quick recap of my understanding of where we're at today. There's been some significant activity. Of course, the drone activity is significant, but the reaction and response to it is what is kind of ramping up at this point. So many people are very, very unhappy with the comments that are coming out that says we don't know what they are. They're all over the place, but don't worry. We don't have to worry about them. That is kind of like an oxymoron, if you will. Right. It doesn't make sense. And I think more people are very, very upset about this. A lot of our elected officials down in South Jersey, you have McAndrews, and he's pushing the envelope. He wants to know what it is. There are rumors that the drones are originating offshore and that they're coming possibly from some type of a drone carrier, of which the Iranians have 2 of them in the Persian Gulf right now. They may have more. These are massive ships carrying hundreds, if not thousands, of drones. So with the wars that are going on in Ukraine and Russia, the Russians relying on Iranian drones, the Chinese doubling down on their technologies, especially drone technologies. And this, again, is what Dan's father was doing the initial work on here in the United States. This is all emerging. Now, the United States has not been in a major conflict in a while where drones have been a threat to our forces. That is no longer the case. The reality now is that if we were to get into some type of an altercation with one of these combatants that are now using drone technology, well beyond what it was originally designed for, we could find ourselves in a world of hurt. Consequently, but we're looking here. A lot of people think it may be government drones. I tend to lean to the fact that it's not, that we're getting a message sent to us. On the West Coast, about a year or so ago, we had U.S. Navy ships that were being swarmed by drones. Now, the only thing I can say about that swarming is that where they were actually being swarmed was an area of the ocean off the coast of San Francisco that was designated a test and development zone for the US government. So they could be US technology. However, all the other things that are taking place around the country right now, I think are well beyond anything that we might be testing. Consequently, it may be our adversaries might be sending a message to us, just like the balloons of a year or 2 years ago. So I'm going to start it right there. The Coast Guard, just yesterday, I believe, they were swarmed and chased by 50 of these drones, up to 50 of them in South Jersey, okay, off the coast. So I'm going to leave it to you to decide what you think these things are. And I can say is that you probably know as much as just about anybody in government at this point. So why don't we open up for discussion? Give us your thoughts. Who would like to start? Okay, Bill. You're unmute. You're muted.
Yeah, I listened to a program today. It was Michael Salla, Dr. Michael Salla. Some of you might know who he is. And he had a gentleman on by the name of Sousa. His last name was Sousa. He was a former FBI operative, retired, and he's also an author. And his feeling was, being in the inside of the agency, that this is a PSYOPs program to instill, I guess, fear and panic and in the population as a prelude to a false invasion. Why? Because his feeling was because they want to make this disclosure appear when it does happen, that these UFOs are basically malevolent.
Malevolent.
And,
Got it.
and there's a security issue, a big security issue, and therefore they're going to justify space program, secret space program eventually, and these other programs that they've been doing in the dark. That's what I heard. And I believe it is PSYOPs. I don't know about the rest of the part of it, but I believe they are trying to, it's like the war in Iraq, which was all contrived by the CIA, right? And there's been many, many examples. That's where the government and the CIA operates. Yeah. So that's my feeling.
Good points, Bill. Good points. Okay, who would like to do next? Mindy, I see your face.
Yeah, I'm thinking, doesn't NORAD know anything? And if they don't, that's a problem.
Right. Okay, my understanding is that from a radar perspective, our radars have not been, the majority of our radars are not really geared for the type, the size of the objects and the altitude and things like that. So there is a gap in our radar coverage. It's not like we're looking for manned bombers or ballistic missiles. Those are different type of objects. So I had read someplace that was a concern and the reason that we're having some problems with the drones. I don't know if that answers the question.
Well, Joe, radar is configured to only pick up something that looks like a plane. I learned that from from some of the TV shows, when we went to the Philly Tower. If you got something that don't look like a plane, it doesn't really show up on radar. So If you got something different, this is different.
Yep.
But a cluster flying together would show up. One individual one probably wouldn't.
Okay. All right. Next. Okay. Bruce Pearson's got his hand up.
Yeah, I think I can add a little bit to this. Let me share my screen if I may. Like I said, Digital Aerial Productions has been involved in building drones. I'm going to share a picture right now if it comes up. This was the first drone used for network television. This is the display at NAB. We built these from scratch. Dan Moss, who has a degree in computer technology as well as mechanical engineering, helped build this. This will carry a 24-pound payload. Doesn't mean I know the state of the art or anything else about it, but this one has 8 1.5 horsepower engines. So the what you're seeing now is light years ahead of this. But the reason I bring this up is these algorithm directed drones that can fly in swarms together, coordinated, can very well be, as Joe alluded to, military operations. And you know, the fear porn factor is a very effective way to control people, also, as was alluded to earlier. So I just talked to Paul Havis this afternoon. He's one of the 4 principals in this company. He's a retired airline pilot, youngest 747 pilot in the history of the U.S. He said that he talked to some of the guys. He just retired because of age a couple of years ago, and he talked to some pilots with Continental United on the West Coast. They were visual contact with drones at 30,000 feet. These are not low-level drones that we're seeing back here on the East Coast, but that's something of an entirely different flavor. So, you know, I don't think anybody's letting out any information if they have it, but it's too pronounced not to have some implications for. Here's the other thing I wanted to point out. You would say, well, this has got to be a hazard to air traffic. If they're below 400 feet, they are legal technically. So these low-level observations that we've been seeing in Jersey and so forth are not illegal and are therefore not. They don't come under the purview of the FAA because they don't constitute a hazard unless they're in a TCA at the airport, in proximity to the airport where you're going to come in for landings and stuff. So I just wanted to pass that along, but you can see how complicated this was. We built our own boards. We developed our own motor technology. This has a DSLR on it. Like I said, this was at NAB a number of years ago, and it was used on the Jacksonville Super Bowl. It replaced the helicopter with a Westcam on it and saved Fox about $38,000 during that broadcast. So I'll shut up and let other people speak.
Thanks, Bruce. Excellent. Okay, along the same lines, the drone technology. About maybe 2 years ago, Tim Beckley passed away. Now, I was coming back from Tim's wake, which was in New Brunswick, and it was about 9 o'clock at night, and I got off of Route 18, heading south on Route 18, and I picked up Newman Springs Road, which took me right past the main entrance to Brookdale Community College. When I got to the main entrance of Brookdale Community College, I looked up, and sure enough, flying over the Navy Road. Now, the Navy Road is about a mile away as the crow flies, and we've been having sightings on that thing for years. My first one started in 1958. But anyway, what I'm seeing is a cluster of lights. They were all different color lights, red, blue, green, white, and they were all clustered. There was no set configuration on them. And the thing was flying at a high rate of speed, probably about 250 miles per hour. So, and it was flying from the north heading south, which would have taken it over the Naval Weapons Station, the storage facility where the munitions were stored. Now, they used to have nukes there until 1997. So, and that was also a hotspot for UFO activity over the years. Now, Dan mentioned 1970, his UFO sighting with his father. 1970 was also a very interesting year because about a mile from the Navy Pier in the Port Monmouth section of Middletown Township, there was a landing, and they left trace elements. It was in a swampy area, and the grass was matted. It was about a 30-foot circular matting of the swamp grass that was there. The police chief, it was investigated by actually Bob Worth, who was the gentleman that produced the Pursuit magazine, the quarterly, which was part of Situ, which was the Society for the Investigation of the Unexplained. Also, part of the investigation team was my high school physics teacher. Middletown Township was, the township this all happened in. So now the other interesting aspect of that, because these things, you want to call them drones, they're unidentified. They're flying lights. They're silver spheres or egg shaped actually, and they had red and white flashing lights all around them. And there were at least several instances of this. But also right there on the Navy Road, one of the Nike sites, the Nike Ajax site, blew up, killing 10 men. It was the worst accident in Nike history. 6 soldiers and 4 DoD civilians. And also just 7 miles away at another Nike site that was a nuclear site. It was a Hercules site. They actually readied their birds for flight in anger. Now, all 24 of the birds that they had out there were nuclear. Now, that happened July of 1970. So there were also sightings over Red Bank and going out towards Fort Monmouth and over Earl at the time. None of them got reported in the paper, though, interestingly. So this type of activity is not anything that's unique. Lastly, what I'd like to point out that for the past 18 months or so, I've gathered about 70 photographs that were given to me by the people that took the photos over the nuclear power plant at Forked River. Now, Forked River, the nuclear power plant, is the oldest nuclear power plant in the country right now. And it's the same design as Fukushima. Okay. Now, they shut it down right after Fukushima because they wanted to make sure that it was safe. And if there were problems, they would discover them. But that area has been a hotbed for UFO drone activity, orange spheres. And I've got pictures of these things as well. So I don't think anything what we're seeing now is ultimately really new. It's now in the public domain. The public is aware of it, whereas this has been going on, I believe, for a long time. Okay, that's all I have. Bruce Cornett, I see you frowning over there. Would you care to weigh in?
Interestingly, this activity has been going on up in southern New York for decades with these drones. I mean, everything from
Stewart Air Force Base.
Right, Stewart, and internet. I understand that they've shut down Stewart because the traffic is so heavy of these drones. Yep. That is amazing. Also, somebody just sent me an email. I put it in the chat. I'd have to go check it out a little bit more, but saying that some of these drones are out searching for weak nuclear radiation from atomic bombs. They say that there are 8 nuclear weapons that have been stolen from the Ukraine, and they don't know where they are. So they're trying to map the area, the distribution of radioactivity on the ground.
Gamma radiation, I believe, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. That's the reason we don't have all the air defenses that we had back in the 60s and 70s, because now they can actually track the radiation on aircraft. So if somebody's carrying a bomb, in theory, they would know about it.
Or if they've brought it ashore, and then it's planted it somewhere. Right.
Yeah, like suitcase bombs or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, good point. Thanks, Jack. Okay, Gloria Morrow, would you like to weigh in? Okay, Stanley Zemek.
I guess I was kind of following MUFON a couple of days ago, and actually one made it out to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. So I think they're getting a little action out there. But the primary concern has been there's no information, and that seems to be a problem. And this is like an all-time first for our area. And why our particular area as opposed to maybe the Pinelands where you have the Jersey Devil or something like that. But up here seems to be the hotbed for viewing them on a Saturday night. Why?
Maybe they saw what's on television. They figure we need that.
Good point. Good point.
Okay.
Thank
But
you.
New Jersey's weird.
Yeah, that's right. New Jersey is weird. Okay. Bambi, how about you? Oh, okay. John, how about you?
Well, when it was first reported, a CIA friend of mine said they were Iranian, and he sent me an article. I put out a weekly newsletter called Never Socialist, and a very pro-Trump type newsletter. So I put that in there, and then I got thinking. I was saying to myself, well, I don't know if they're Iran's, but could they be China's? And Trader Joe, that's with a T and not a D. Traitor Joe is maybe allowing China to come over and film areas like he didn't do anything about those balloons that came in from the West Coast. I did see what you had said about they're searching for something. Now, I don't think this is scaring anybody right now. If anything, it's a big vote of no confidence in the government, in the Air Force, in the Coast Guard, in everything, just like everything that's happened the last 4 years. It's all been lies. But if there is like a broken arrow scenario that, there's a nuclear weapon out there and they're searching for a signal or something from a suitcase bomb, now that's scary. And I could see that actually being what they're doing. But, so who's behind that? Is it Ukraine because they think Trump's not going to support them? Or is it Iran because they think as soon as Trump gets in, he's going to brick the camel as far as Iran goes? I don't know. But that would be the scary scenario.
Good point. Good point. Bruce Pearson. Oh, you're muted, Bruce.
I'm sorry about that. The computer locked up here. My Apple did, but I think that all of these possibilities. We were discussing this again earlier today with the other pilots that I hang around with, and I think all of these possible theories are worth considering. There are a number of geopolitical aspects to this that may be in play here, as you just alluded to, whether it may be connected with very, very high strangeness that is military based, the testing of our technology. I think that when you in aggregate look at $2 or $3 trillion of black budget money since the 60s that has been spent on research, that's not overpriced toilet seats for military aircraft. That goes far beyond that. So they put it out there in front of everybody. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. So I don't know what is going on here, certainly any better than anyone else. But now that it's out there in front of millions of people, the spin doctors better get at it and do something that people will buy. But I really I'm actually writing a book on conditioning, and I really think that we have an attention span that's about 30 seconds long in this country on any news. And a week from now, nobody will even be talking about it. They forgot about it. I could give you a list of stuff in the last year that's happening. Go, oh yeah, whatever happened to that? What was the follow-up? Because our journalism industry does not follow up on anything long term anymore. It's hit and run, just like it is on TikTok or Facebook or anything else. I would welcome disagreement on that, but I think it'll be off the radar pretty quick. We'll move on to the next issue.
Okay. I kept this up a little bit longer than planned. I'd like to thank Dan Harari for being a great guest tonight.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. I'd like to have you back again.
Well, I'm having you on my show pretty soon.
Oh, that's right, in January.
Yeah.
Okay, and also like to thank everybody for being here tonight. Hopefully we all got something. I think the conversation was very enlightened, a lot of different perspectives, and I think we were all respectful of each other's time and comments. So I think this was a good learning experience for all of us.
Yeah, I appreciate being invited into your group, and Joe, talking to you makes me wish, Miss Belmar, and specifically Vic's Pizza, Vic's Pizza in Bradley Beach, Vic's.
Yeah, actually, I
Oh
do.
yes, yeah. That's my favorite when I go back. 'Cause the first place before I go see my mother, I go to Vic's Pizza.
Mix.
Talking
Gotta
to
wear
you
our priorities, huh?
makes me homesick for the Jersey Shore. But it's nice to meet you all, and again, HollywoodDisclosureLines.org for those of you interested. And I appreciate that you
Thanks, Dan.
invited me on. Thanks a lot.
Fascinating.
And
Thank you.
just to
Thanks, everyone.
recap, um, who's going to send me their information? I'm going to pass along to Dan. Bruce, that was you, right? Okay. Dan, also, if anything that you want me to pass along to, my folks, I will be sending out the information about the link and everything. So
If you could put Dan Harari author.com link for the books, and then HollywoodDisclosureLines.org for the group. Those two, that would be great. All right, I have to go call my 90-year-old mother. I call her every Sunday. She's probably getting worried, so I have to go. Thanks, you guys.
thanks again, Dan.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, everybody, I will keep the bridge up if you want to continue the conversation. We can talk about a lot of things if you want. And
Hey,
if
Joe?
not, yes.
Joe, where can we go now? And when you send us a summary, which is really helpful, but in the next, let's say, coming weeks, I would really love to hear from you because you're going to get feedback from not only the folks who were here tonight, but your contacts. So I would very much like to be in the loop and find out what you learn.
Sure, absolutely. I have not been sending out a lot of things. Spam is something that nobody likes, but everybody gets. And I try not to. I try not to spam you too much. So, but I will send out information our next meeting, obviously, and the information that I promised I would send out for Dan as well as anybody else. So, anyway, that's all that I have.
And when
Thank
did
you,
you say the
everyone.
next meetings are? When in January?
It'll be the fourth Sunday of the month.
Fourth Sunday. Okay.
Fourth Sunday. It'll be the same time as tonight. Anybody have anything somebody that you think I should try to get on? Send me your suggestions. I will gladly accept them. And like I said, it hasn't been too hard finding interesting people to talk about interesting subjects so far. So,
Well, there's always Lou Elizondo.
right. Although he can't talk about anything because it's all top
That's
secret.
right. It's an NDA all the way.
Actually, that thing about the NDA, I had a gentleman that was about 88 years old, and he came through with the Nike site. I was giving a tour at our Nike site. And when he came in, he said, this brings back memory. Now, he was a Nike guy from the 1950s. And he said, and he was at a Nike Ajax site, which was non-nuclear, up in North Jersey. And he said, there's something that happened up there that I cannot to this day talk about. I said, what do you mean? He said, I can't talk about it. It was highly classified. I said, but you weren't a nuclear, you were an anti-aircraft missile guy with, non-nuclear munitions. He said, and reading between the lines, I believe they had a UFO encounter because in 1958, down in Maryland, Olney Durwood, Maryland, a UFO crashed right outside the landing or the launcher area of a Nike site down there. That was an Ajax only Nike site as well. And so, you have a lot of tie-in between these Nikes. And it seems even the guys I work with, the guys I give the tours with, one actually had a UFO supposedly hovering right over his radar van. He was a radar operator at Fort Tilden, just across the harbor from Sandy Hook. And he said people on the beach came running up to the fence and started screaming at him and said, "Did you see it? Did you see it?" And he said, "See what?" And he said there was a UFO hanging right over your facility. So, but none of this ever made it into the public domain and probably never will, other than his anecdotal stories. You know? So,
Joe,
yes.
I sometimes wonder whether or not the ETs are coming here because of our moonshine, and that's why they get all the crashes.
Actually, tell you the truth, between you, me, and the walls, I think as they fly over the earth, they look down and say, "No intelligent life there, keep going." And they continue on. Now, that who knows? If, if they're playing games with us, we're the proverbial ants, and they can have about as much interest in us, probably. So, anyway, anybody have any closing thoughts? Okay, thank you, Bambi. Anybody have any closing thoughts with the no?
I know that no drones are coming to Southwest PA.
None are. Really?
There's nothing here. We're selling US steel to Japan.
Yeah.
There's nothing here. So I'm safe.
Nothing in El Paso, Texas either.
Wait, you got fracking.
Yeah, maybe they'll blow it up.
Yeah, they're all over Las Cruces. There's none in El Paso.
How you doing there, Mindy? There she
I'm
is.
good. I don't have any closing thoughts, but I do want to say thank you. This was very interesting talk.
Well, thank you for being here, Mindy. We always enjoy having you as a guest.
And now I can on demand the last episode of Yellowstone or catch the last 10 minutes without seeing the first part.
Okay, everybody. Well, with all that, I'm going to say goodnight to you all, and we'll see you at the next one.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays,
Be
everybody.
safe. Stay warm.